The throne room of Valdris Prime stretched so vast that clouds sometimes formed near its golden ceiling. Emperor Dravones the Eternal reclined on his seat of crystallized starlight, a structure so massive it could be seen from orbit. His scales, black as the void between stars, reflected the light of 1,000 glowing orbs that floated throughout the chamber. Each eye was larger than most species spacecraft, ancient and weary, watching the endless parade of supplicants with the patience of stone. 50,000 years. That was how long Dravones had ruled. 50,000 years of conquest, of accumulation, of watching empires rise like morning mist and disappear just as quickly. He had seen stars born and die. He had witnessed the evolution of entire civilizations. And through it all he had collected treasure. The line of representatives waiting to present their offerings snaked through corridors that went on for miles. They came from every corner of the known galaxy, carrying the finest their worlds could produce. Some trembled with fear. Others held their heads high with pride. All of them hoped their tribute would please the Dragon Emperor. "The delegation from Kelthara 7, Your Eternal Majesty," announced Sethril, Dravones' chief advisor. The younger dragon's emerald scales gleamed as he gestured toward 3 insect-like beings, each carrying a containment sphere. The Keltharans clicked forward on multiple legs, their antennae quivering. "Great Emperor," their leader spoke through a translation device, "we present singing crystals from the Meridian Nebula, formed in the heart of dying stars. Their music plays frequencies that exist beyond normal space." They activated one sphere. A sound filled the throne room, beautiful and haunting, notes that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The assembled court dragons shifted, impressed. Such crystals were rare beyond measure. Dravones tilted his head slightly. "Adequate. Place them with the others." The Keltharans bowed deeply, relief flooding their postures as they scurried away. They had feared rejection. Adequate was practically high praise from the Emperor. "The mining consortium of Pontius Major," Sethril continued. A group of rock-like beings rolled forward, their spokesman a boulder nearly 10 feet tall. "Eternal One, we offer gravity pearls from the collapsed stars. Each contains the compressed mass of a small moon, worth more than entire solar systems." Dravones barely looked. "Accepted. Next." And so it went. Hour after hour. The Aurelians brought a moon they had spent a century carving into a perfect sphere, its surface etched with the history of their species. The Phosphine Collective offered living light forms that danced in colors no natural eye could perceive. The Technomancers of Forge World presented weapons that could crack planets. Dravones accepted some. Rejected others. His expression never changed. Sethril watched his emperor with growing concern. This was not new. For the past 1,000 years, maybe longer, Dravones had shown less and less interest in the tributes. Once, the emperor had examined each gift with curiosity, had asked questions, had shown appreciation for exceptional craftsmanship. Now, everything blended together into a monotonous stream of offerings that meant nothing. "Your Majesty seems distant today," Sethril ventured quietly during a brief pause. "I am distant every day," Dravones replied, his voice like grinding mountains. "When you have seen everything, nothing is new. When you own everything, nothing has value. Perhaps a hunt? The wild nebulas beyond the rim still hold challenges. I have hunted creatures that could swallow suns. There are no challenges left, Sethril. Only routine." The younger dragon fell silent, unsure how to respond. What did one say to a being who had lived so long that existence itself had become boring? The tribute ceremonies continued until the twin suns of Valdris Prime began to set, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. Dravones dismissed the court with a wave of his massive claw, the sound like a landslide. The representatives filed out, some elated their tributes were accepted, others dejected by rejection. "Anything else requiring my attention?" Dravones asked, his tone making it clear he hoped the answer was no. Sethril consulted a data tablet held in his smaller foreclaw. "Only routine military reports, Your Majesty." "Shall I summarize?" "If you must." Patrol Squadron Theta engaged smugglers near the Vortex Cluster. All contraband seized. Patrol Squadron Omega prevented an asteroid collision with the colony world of Brescian 4. And Patrol Squadron Delta intercepted pirates in Sector 471C, protecting a merchant convoy. No dragon casualties in any engagement. Dravones nodded absently. His military forces numbered in the tens of thousands. They enforced peace across the Empire, protected trade routes, and maintained order. These reports were filed every single day. Hundreds of incidents, all resolved efficiently. "Very good," he said, already turning toward the private chambers behind his throne. See that the commanders receive standard commendations. Of course, Your Majesty. Dravones walked through corridors lined with treasures from 1,000 worlds. Paintings that changed their scenes based on the viewer's thoughts. Sculptures carved from frozen time itself. Musical instruments that played themselves, filling the air with melodies composed by extinct civilizations. He passed them all without a glance. He descended into the vault beneath the palace, a cavern system so vast it had its own weather patterns. Mountains of gold coins from 100 different currencies rose like ranges of hills. Gems the size of houses glittered in carefully organized piles. Artifacts of unimaginable power rested on pedestals, each protected by its own security field. This was his hoard. The accumulation of 50,000 years of rule. It represented wealth beyond the understanding of most species. Entire star systems could not match the value contained in these caves. Dravones felt nothing looking at it. He remembered, dimly, when each new treasure had excited him. When finding a rare artifact had felt like victory. When adding to the hoard had purpose and meaning. That feeling had faded somewhere around the 20,000-year mark. Now it was just stuff. Piles and piles of stuff. Is this all there is? He asked the empty cavern. His voice echoed back, offering no answers. Meanwhile, far across the galaxy in the unremarkable Sector 471C, a transport ship limped toward its destination. The vessel carried 300 human colonists to a newly established settlement on a world they had named Hope's Landing. The ship's hull bore scorch marks from weapons fire, and several windows had been hastily patched. In one of the family compartments, William Harper held his wife Sarah close. They sat on a small bunk, still trembling from their near-death experience. Pirates had appeared from nowhere, their weapons already firing. The colony transport had no defenses, no way to fight back. Then the dragon ships arrived. William had never seen anything so terrifying and beautiful at the same time. 3 massive vessels, each one shaped like a coiled serpent, had materialized from faster-than-light travel. They moved with impossible grace for their size, and their weapons had turned the pirate ships into expanding clouds of debris in seconds. The Dragon Patrol had verified the colonists were safe, then vanished as quickly as they appeared. The entire engagement lasted less than 3 minutes. "We could have died," Sarah whispered, not for the first time. "But we didn't," William replied, stroking her hair. "Because they saved us." Their son Eddie pressed his face against the repaired window, watching the stars stream past. At 7 years old, he was too young to fully understand how close they had come to disaster. What he understood was that dragons, real dragons from the stories, had appeared and saved them. "Dad," Eddie said, turning from the window, his eyes bright with wonder, "we need to say thank you." William smiled despite his exhaustion. "To who, buddy?" "The dragons are gone." "We could find them," Eddie insisted with the simple certainty of childhood. "Mom always says when someone helps you, you say thank you. The dragons helped us. We should say thank you." Sarah looked at her son, and despite everything they had just survived, she felt her heart swell with pride. Even after being frightened, even after seeing weapons fire and destruction, Eddie's first thought was gratitude. "You're right," she said softly. "We should." William raised an eyebrow. "Sarah, we're colonists. We don't even know where the Dragon Patrol is based, and even if we did—" "Eddie's right," Sarah interrupted. "Someone saved our lives. Our son's life. The least we can do is try to say thank you properly." Eddie nodded seriously, already running to find his coloring supplies. If they were going to thank dragons, he should probably make them something nice. The request came through the normal diplomatic channels, but there was nothing normal about it. Communications Officer Veln, a dragon with copper-colored scales, stared at her screen in confusion. A human transport ship, small and civilian-grade, was requesting an audience with Emperor Dravones the Eternal. This happened sometimes. Species wanted to meet the Emperor for various reasons. But those requests came with weeks of advance notice, detailed proposals, and lists of the magnificent tributes they would bring. This request had none of that. "They say they just want to talk to whoever saved them from pirates," Veln muttered, reading the message again. No tribute mentioned. No ambassadors. Just a family. Her supervisor, an older dragon named Korthos, looked over her shoulder. "A family? What kind of diplomatic mission sends a family?" "It says here they were on a colony convoy that was attacked in Sector 471C 3 weeks ago. Patrol Squadron Delta saved them. They want to express gratitude." Korthos snorted, smoke curling from his nostrils. "They can send a message for that. They don't need an imperial audience. That's what I told them. They insist on doing it in person." The The two dragons looked at each other. This was unusual enough to be interesting. And Emperor Dravones had been so listless lately. Perhaps something unexpected would amuse him even slightly. Let them come, Korthos decided. His Majesty could use a distraction. Just don't let them waste too much of his time. 3 days later, a small transport ship landed on one of the outer platforms of the Imperial Palace. It looked out of place among the grand diplomatic vessels, like a minnow swimming with whales. The ship was old, its paint faded, clearly designed for simple cargo runs rather than diplomatic missions. William Harper stepped out first, his heart pounding. The platform alone was larger than the entire colony settlement they were heading to. Everything around them was built on a scale meant for dragons. The archways leading into the palace rose 300 feet high. The landing pad could have held 1,000 ships the size of theirs. Sarah emerged next, holding Eddie's hand tightly. Their son stared around in wonder, his mouth hanging open. "It's so big," Eddie whispered. "Remember what we practiced," Sarah said softly. "Be polite. Be respectful. And don't run off," William added, though he suspected that instruction would be tested. A dragon appeared to greet them, much smaller than William had expected, though still large enough that its head was level with a second-story window. Its bronze scales gleamed in the sunlight. "I am Attendant Miras," the dragon said, its voice surprisingly gentle. "You are the humans who requested an audience?" "Yes," William said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I'm William Harper. This is my wife Sarah and our son Eddie. We were hoping to thank whoever saved us from the pirate attack." Miras tilted her head, curious. "You traveled all this way just to say thank you?" "It seemed important," Sarah replied. The dragon studied them for a long moment. Humans were still relatively new to the galactic community. Their species had only achieved faster-than-light travel 70 years ago. Most dragons found them fascinating in the way one might find an interesting insect fascinating, worth observing but not particularly important. "Follow me," Miras said finally. "Though I should warn you, the Emperor is not accustomed to audiences without tribute." "We brought something," Eddie piped up, clutching a rolled paper to his chest. Miras glanced at the child but said nothing. The walk through the palace took 20 minutes. The Harpers followed Miras through corridors so vast their footsteps echoed like whispers in a canyon. They passed treasures worth more than their entire home planet: statues of living crystal, fountains that flowed with liquid light, gardens where plants from 1,000 worlds grew together in impossible harmony. Eddie's eyes grew wider with every step. Sarah kept a firm grip on his hand. Finally they reached the throne room. The massive doors swung open and William felt his breath catch. The chamber beyond was so large it had its own horizon. And there, at the far end, sat Emperor Dravones the Eternal. The dragon was beyond enormous. His head alone was the size of their transport ship. His scales caught the light like polished midnight, and his golden eyes watched their approach with ancient, unfathomable intelligence. The throne room was not crowded today, but a dozen court dragons observed from various positions around the chamber. They whispered to each other, clearly amused by the sight of 3 tiny humans walking across the vast floor. Sethril, the chief advisor, announced them formally. "Your Eternal Majesty, the humans from Sector 471C. Dravones regarded them with the same distant interest he gave to everything. You requested an audience." William bowed, having practiced the gesture. Sarah did the same, pulling Eddie into a bow beside her. "Yes, Your Majesty. We wanted to thank whoever saved our convoy from pirates 3 weeks ago." "Why?" Dravones asked simply. The question caught William off guard. Because you saved our lives. Our son's life. We would have died without your intervention." "My patrol forces were performing their duty," Dravones replied. "They maintain order throughout the Empire. No thanks are necessary." "Maybe not necessary," Sarah said, finding her courage. "But right. When someone helps you, you say thank you. We wanted to do that properly." A few dragons in the court chuckled at the simple sentiment. Sethril looked mildly embarrassed for them. Dravones studied the small family. "You came all this way, interrupting your journey, just to say thank you?" "Yes," William confirmed. "And what tribute do you offer?" William's stomach sank. "We're colonists, Your Majesty. We don't have treasures like the other species bring. We're just farmers heading to a new world. We have nothing of value to dragons." The court dragons' chuckling grew louder. "How foolish to request an audience with the Emperor and bring nothing." Sethril looked pained. But Eddie suddenly pulled free from his mother's grip. "Eddie, no." Sarah reached for him, but the boy was already running. His small feet slapped against the polished floor as he sprinted toward the throne. Court dragons gasped. Myrrhus moved to intercept, but Dravones raised one claw slightly, stopping her. Eddie ran right up to the base of the throne, craning his neck back to look up at the massive dragon. He was breathing hard from the run, his face flushed with excitement and nervousness. "Thank you for saving my mom and dad," Eddie called up, his young voice echoing in the vast chamber. "You're a hero." The throne room fell absolutely silent. Dravones stared down at the child. The word echoed in his mind. Hero. In 50,000 years, through countless wars, conquests, and achievements, no one had ever called him a hero. Conqueror, yes. Emperor, certainly. God, even by some of the more religious species. Master, ruler, eternal one. But never hero. Heroes were something from stories. Heroes helped people because it was right, not because it was duty or strategy. Heroes were what children believed in. "What did you say?" Dravones asked, his massive voice surprisingly soft. Eddie didn't flinch. "You're a hero. You saved us from the bad guys. Like in my books." William and Sarah stood frozen, terrified their son had just insulted the Emperor somehow. But Dravones continued to stare at the boy with an expression they couldn't read. "I brought you something," Eddie continued, unrolling the paper he carried. "I made it for you." He held up a drawing. It was done in crayons, the lines wobbly and imperfect the way children's art always is. But the image was clear, a large black dragon breathing fire at smaller ships, while other ships flew away to safety. Stars filled the background, and Eddie had written in careful letters at the bottom, "Thank you for saving us." The court dragons could barely contain themselves now. A drawing? A child scribbles? This was what they brought the Emperor? But Dravones reached down with one massive claw, moving with incredible delicacy. He took the paper between two talons, lifting it up to examine it closely. The drawing was simple. Crude even. Worth nothing in material terms. But it depicted him not as a fearsome emperor or an ancient force of nature. It showed him as Eddie saw him, as a hero who helped people. Something shifted in Dravones' chest, a feeling he hadn't experienced in thousands of years. It felt warm and uncomfortable and strangely pleasant all at once. "You made this yourself?" he asked Eddie. "Yes. I worked really hard on it. I wanted the dragon to look brave." "I see." Dravones studied the drawing for another long moment. Then he looked at Eddie's parents. "You taught your child to do this? To thank those who help him?" William nodded, still uncertain if they were in trouble. "We think it's important. Gratitude matters." "Gratitude," Dravones repeated the word slowly as if tasting it. Dravones held the crayon drawing between two talons, careful not to tear the fragile paper. The court dragons had stopped laughing. Something in the Emperor's silence made them uneasy. They had expected him to dismiss the humans immediately, perhaps even punish them for wasting his time with such a worthless offering. Instead, Dravones continued to study the simple picture. A black dragon breathing fire. Small ships fleeing to safety. Stars made from yellow and white crayons. The wobbly handwriting at the bottom. "How long did this take you to make?" Dravones asked Eddie. The boy thought for a moment. Maybe 2 hours? I wanted to get the stars right. And I had to start over once because I made your wings too small." "You started over," Dravones repeated quietly. "To make it better?" "Yeah. Heroes should look cool." Sethril stepped forward nervously. "Your Majesty, if these humans have concluded their business, perhaps." "They have not concluded," Dravones interrupted, still looking at Eddie. "I have questions." He addressed William and Sarah. "You said you are colonists. Where are you traveling?" "A world called Hope's Landing," William answered. "In the Outer Rim territories. It's a farming colony. And you interrupted this journey to come here." "Yes, Your Majesty." "Why?" Dravones leaned forward slightly, genuinely curious now. "The patrol that saved you was simply doing its assigned duty. We protect trade routes and civilian vessels throughout the Empire. It happens thousands of times each day. Why does this particular incident require special acknowledgement?" Sarah spoke up, her voice growing stronger. "Because someone could have died and someone else chose to prevent that. That choice matters. The fact that it's your job doesn't make it less important. We wanted you to know that what you do, what your people do, it matters to us. To families like ours." Dravones sat back slowly. In all his years of receiving tributes, species had offered him wealth to curry favor, gifts to display their value, treasures to show their respect for his power. But no one had ever simply acknowledged that his actions mattered. "You three will stay as my guests," Dravones announced suddenly. "For a few days." The court erupted in whispers. Sethril looked shocked. Your Majesty? I wish to understand this better, Dravonis said. Attendant Miris, see that they are given appropriate quarters. Human-sized furniture. Whatever food and comfort they require. But Your Majesty, one of the court dragons protested, they brought no real tribute. They brought something none of you have ever offered me, Dravonis said, his voice taking on an edge that silenced the room. Sincerity. William and Sarah exchanged glances, uncertain what was happening. Eddie, however, grinned widely. Does that mean we can see more of the palace? The boy asked. Despite himself, Dravonis felt the corners of his mouth turn up slightly, an expression he had not made in centuries. Yes, small human. You may see more of the palace. Miris led the family away to guest quarters, leaving the court in stunned silence. Sethril approached the throne carefully. Your Majesty. I don't understand. What do you hope to gain from keeping them here? Dravonis looked at the crayon drawing again. Perhaps nothing. Perhaps everything. I am not certain yet. That evening, the Harpers found themselves in quarters that were bizarrely oversized for them. The bed could have slept 20 humans. The doorways were tall enough to drive a truck through. But someone had thoughtfully provided human-scale furniture within the giant rooms, and the food brought to them was surprisingly normal. Fruits, bread, cooked vegetables, and meat. Eddie explored every corner excitedly while his parents sat together, still processing what had happened. Did we just become prisoners of the Dragon Emperor? William asked quietly. I don't think so, Sarah replied. He seemed, I don't know, curious. Is that possible? I liked him, Eddie announced, bouncing on his appropriately sized bed. He was nice. For someone really, really big. Meanwhile, Dravonis descended into his treasure vault alone. He walked past mountains of gold coins, their metallic scent filling the air. Each pile represented the tribute from different worlds, some conquered, some allied, all paying homage to his power. He passed shelves holding artifacts that kings had fought wars to possess. Weapons that could level cities. Crowns worn by emperors of fallen civilizations. Books containing knowledge lost to time. Art created by species now extinct. His footsteps echoed in the vast cavern as he made his way to the central chamber, where his most prized possessions were kept in stasis fields. A sword forged in the heart of a collapsing star. A gem containing the last light of a dead galaxy. A sculpture carved from compressed time itself. Dravonis looked at these treasures, objects that represented billions of years of accumulated wealth and power. He had spent lifetimes collecting them. Civilizations had risen and fallen in his quest to own the rarest, most valuable items in existence. He felt absolutely nothing. The treasures sat there, beautiful and valuable and utterly meaningless. They were things. Just things. Having them or not having them made no difference to who he was or what his life meant. Dravonis pulled out the crayon drawing, which he had carefully carried with him. He looked at it in the soft glow of the treasure vault's lighting. The paper was cheap, probably worth a fraction of a credit. The crayons were basic colors, the kind given to children everywhere. The artistic skill was minimal, a 7-year-old's understanding of perspective and proportion. By any objective measure, this was the least valuable item he had ever been offered. But Eddie had spent 2 hours on it. Had started over to make it better. Had brought it all this way just to say thank you. Had called him a hero. For the first time in thousands of years, Dravonis felt something when looking at what someone had given him. Not greed, not satisfaction at acquiring something rare, not pride in owning something others wanted. He felt valued, appreciated, seen as more than just a powerful being to be feared or obeyed. The drawing showed him not as Emperor Dravonis the Eternal, collector of worlds and treasures. It showed him as someone who helped others. Someone who made a difference in people's lives. A hero. Dravonis carefully created a small stasis field around the drawing, preserving it from time and decay. He placed it on a pedestal in the center of his most valuable treasures. It looked absurd there, a child's crayon drawing surrounded by objects of unimaginable worth. Yet somehow, it was the only thing in the entire vault that felt real. He stood there for hours thinking. 50,000 years of existence. 50,000 years of accumulating wealth and power. And a 7-year-old human child had made him feel something that all those treasures never could. What did that mean? Dravonis thought about the patrol that had saved the convoy. Squadron Delta performing routine duties. They had protected civilians because it was their job. They filed a report and moved on to the next patrol. It was a transaction. The Empire provided protection, civilians paid tribute in return. But Eddie didn't see it as a transaction. He saw it as someone helping someone else. He saw heroism in a routine patrol. He saw something worth thanking. How many other routine patrols happened every day? How many civilians were saved by dragon forces performing their duties? Thousands probably. Tens of thousands. And Dravonis had never thought about any of them. They were just reports. Numbers. Statistics showing the Empire functioned efficiently. But every single one of those numbers represented people. Families like the Harpers. Children like Eddie. People who continued living because dragon forces protected them. When had he stopped thinking of them as people and started thinking of them as numbers? Dravonis walked back through his treasure vault slowly. He looked at the accumulated wealth of 50,000 years with new eyes. What was it all for? He couldn't use most of it. He didn't need it. Some of these treasures he had forgotten he even owned. He had spent lifetimes gathering things to fill the emptiness inside him. But things couldn't fill that emptiness. He knew that now, standing in a vault full of wonders and feeling nothing except when he looked at a simple drawing. The drawing represented something the treasures didn't. It represented a connection between people. It represented gratitude freely given, not extracted through fear or power. It represented being valued for what you do, not what you own. It represented meaning. Dravonis climbed back up to the palace, his mind churning with unfamiliar thoughts. He passed servants who bowed deeply, their fear of him obvious. When had everyone started fearing him instead of, what? Respecting him? Appreciating him? Had anyone ever appreciated him, or had they simply recognized his power? He found himself in the corridor outside the guest quarters where the Harpers slept. He could hear Eddie's voice through the door, excitedly telling his parents about everything he had seen. The boy's enthusiasm was infectious, his joy genuine and pure. When was the last time Dravonis had felt genuine joy about anything? He couldn't remember. The Emperor of the Galaxy, ruler of countless worlds, collector of infinite treasures, stood in a hallway listening to a child's laughter and realized he couldn't remember the last time he had felt truly happy. A crayon drawing had done what 50,000 years of accumulated wealth could not. It had made him feel something real. And Dravonis knew with sudden clarity that everything was about to change. The next morning, Dravonis did something he had not done in over 3,000 years. He requested a private meeting with visitors. Not a formal audience in the throne room with advisors and court dragons watching. Just a conversation. Sethril nearly dropped his data tablet when the Emperor made the request. A private meeting, Your Majesty? With the humans? Is there something unclear about my instruction? Dravonis asked mildly. No, Your Majesty. Of course not. When was the last time you? 3,217 years ago, Dravonis said. I remember. Arrange it. The Harpers were brought to a smaller chamber. Smaller by dragon standards, which meant it was still the size of a concert hall by human measurements. But it felt more intimate than the vast throne room. Comfortable seating had been arranged for the humans, and Eddie immediately started exploring the room's decorations while his parents sat nervously. Dravonis entered without ceremony, surprising them. They started to bow, but he waved a claw dismissively. That is not necessary here, he said. I wish to talk, not hold court. William and Sarah exchanged glances. This was not what they expected from an ancient, all-powerful emperor. Your Majesty, William began carefully, we're honored, but we're not sure what you want from us. I want to understand something, Dravonis said, settling himself on the floor so his head was closer to their level. Yesterday your son called me a hero. Why? Eddie looked up from examining a crystalline sculpture. Because you saved people. That's what heroes do. But I did not personally save you, Dravonis pointed out. My patrol forces did. I did not even know about the incident until you arrived. But you're in charge, right? Eddie asked. My teacher says leaders are responsible for what their people do. So if your dragons saved us, you saved us too. Dravonis considered this. By that logic, I would also be responsible when my forces fail to save someone. Well, yeah, Eddie said with the simple honesty of childhood. That's what being responsible means. The Emperor sat quietly for a moment. In 50,000 years, countless beings had told him he was great, powerful, eternal, wise. But a child had just casually pointed out that he was responsible for every failure of his empire, and somehow that felt more true than all the praise. Sarah spoke up gently. Eddie, maybe let His Majesty ask his questions? It's fine, Dravonis said. His directness is refreshing. He turned his attention to William. You said yesterday that you came here to teach your son gratitude. Explain this to me. William thought carefully about how to answer. Well, we believe that recognizing when someone helps you is important. Not because you owe them something but because it acknowledges their choice to do good. When you thank someone you're telling them that what they did mattered. But my forces were doing their job, Dravonis said. They are paid, trained, and equipped to protect civilians. It is a transaction. They provide service, the Empire receives tribute and loyalty in return. Maybe for you it's a transaction, Sarah said. But for us it's our lives. Eddie's life. Those patrol dragons didn't have to care whether we lived or died. They could have been slower, less careful. They could have decided some human colonists weren't worth the risk. But they didn't. They saved us. That deserves recognition beyond just doing their job. Dravonis tilted his massive head, thinking. So you are thanking them for caring? For choosing to care, William corrected. There's a difference. Anyone can follow orders. But doing something because you genuinely want to help people, that's different. That's heroism. Eddie had wandered back over, climbing onto his father's lap. Mr. Dragon Emperor, can I ask you something? You may call me Dravonis, the Emperor said. And yes, you may ask. Do you like being an emperor? The question caught Dravonis completely off guard. In 50,000 years, no one had ever asked him that. They asked for favors, for mercy, for permission. They proclaimed their loyalty or fear. But no one had ever simply asked if he enjoyed his existence. I have never considered whether I like it, Dravonis admitted. It is what I am. But do you have fun? Eddie persisted. Fun. Dravonis repeated the word slowly. No. I do not think I have fun. That's sad, Eddie said with the blunt sympathy of a child. Everybody should have fun sometimes. Sarah looked mortified. Eddie, you can't just tell the Emperor his life is sad. Why not? Dravonis asked. He is correct. My existence is sad. I had simply not realized it until recently. The adults fell silent, unsure how to respond to that. Over the next few days, Dravonis spent hours with the Harper family. He asked them about human culture, about their lives, about why they did things. The conversations were unlike anything in his long existence. Eddie showed him more drawings, explaining each one enthusiastically. He talked about his friends back on Earth, about games they played, about his favorite foods. Everything was new and exciting to the boy, and his enthusiasm was contagious. William told Dravonis about farming, about choosing to leave Earth for a new world, about hoping to build something meaningful. He spoke about community, about neighbors helping each other not because they had to, but because that was what good people did. Sarah explained human concepts of family, friendship, and love. She talked about how humans measured success not just in wealth or power, but in relationships and positive impact on others. We have a saying, Sarah told him one afternoon. It's not what you own that matters, it's what you do and who you do it with. Your species values experiences over possessions? Dravonis asked. Some of us do. Not everyone, but many of us try to. At the end of your life, you won't remember the things you owned. You'll remember the moments that mattered. The people you loved. The good you did. Dravonis thought about his vast treasure hoard, accumulated over millennia. Would he remember acquiring any specific treasure when he finally died? Probably not. They all blended together into a meaningless pile of things. But he would remember this conversation. He would remember Eddie's drawing. He would remember the word hero. On the fourth day, Dravonis asked William the question that had been bothering him most. Why did you really come here? Not just to say thank you. You could have sent a message for that. You risked time, resources, and safety to travel to the Imperial Palace. Why? William was quiet for a long moment. Honestly? Because I wanted Eddie to learn that gratitude is important enough to act on. Words are easy. Anyone can say thank you. But showing it, making an effort, making a sacrifice to properly acknowledge when someone helps you, that teaches a deeper lesson. You used your son's education as the reason for this journey, Dravonis said slowly, understanding dawning. This whole trip was a lesson for him. And for us, Sarah added. It's easy to be grateful when things are convenient. It's harder when it costs you something. But that's when it matters most. Dravonis realized they had traveled all this way, delayed their new life, spent resources they probably couldn't spare, just to teach their child the importance of genuine gratitude. Not gratitude as a transaction, not gratitude to gain favor, but gratitude as a value worth sacrificing for. Eddie ran up to Dravonis, holding up a new drawing. Look, I drew you again. This time you're protecting a whole planet. The Emperor looked at the colorful crayon marks showing a dragon wrapped protectively around a world. In the drawing, people on the planet were smiling and waving up at the dragon. Do people really see my forces this way? Dravonis asked quietly. As protectors rather than overlords? Some do, William said carefully. Others probably see you as rulers they must obey. It depends on how you treat them, I suppose. That night, after the Harpers had gone to sleep, Dravonis called an emergency council session. His advisors gathered nervously, uncertain what crisis had prompted such an urgent meeting. I am making changes to imperial policy, Dravonis announced. Effective immediately, all human colony worlds are under my personal protection. The advisors murmured approval. This was not unusual. The Emperor sometimes took special interest in certain species or regions. Furthermore, Dravonis continued, they will pay no tribute. The murmuring stopped. Your Majesty? Sethral asked carefully. No tribute at all? None. They are not subjects. They are friends of the Empire. Friends? Another advisor sputtered. Your Majesty, the Empire does not have friends. It has subjects, vassals, allies of convenience. It has friends now, Dravonis said firmly. The humans will receive full imperial protection not because they pay for it, but because it is right to protect those who cannot protect themselves. But the other species will demand the same treatment, an advisor protested. The entire tribute system could collapse. Good, Dravonis said. Let it collapse. I am tired of transactions. I am tired of everything having a price. These humans traveled across space just to say thank you, expecting nothing in return. They taught their child that gratitude and kindness matter more than wealth. When was the last time any of our tribute-paying species did something like that? The council sat in stunned silence. Your Majesty, Sethral said slowly, what exactly did these humans say to you? They reminded me of something I forgot millennia ago, Dravonis replied. They reminded me why power exists. Not to accumulate wealth or inspire fear, but to protect those who need protection. To do good because it is good, not because it profits you. He stood, his massive form towering over the council. A 7-year-old child called me a hero, Dravonis said quietly. I want to be worthy of that title. News traveled fast across the galaxy, especially news about the Dragon Emperor. Within days, every species in the Empire knew that Dravonis had granted humans special status as friends, requiring no tribute. Within weeks, the story had grown and changed as stories do. Some versions claimed the Emperor had adopted a human child, others said humans possessed magical powers of persuasion. But the core truth remained. Dravonis had shown unprecedented favor to a species that brought him nothing of material value. The Imperial Palace was suddenly flooded with requests for audiences. Species that had paid tribute for centuries without expecting anything beyond basic protection now wanted to be recognized as friends too. The waiting list for meetings grew from weeks to months. Sethral reviewed the requests with growing concern. Your Majesty, we have 73 species requesting immediate audiences. All of them claim they wish to express gratitude for imperial protection. How convenient, Dravonis said dryly. Where were these grateful species before? Preparing their tributes as always, Sethral replied. Your Majesty, I must advise caution. If you grant everyone the same status as the humans? I will not, Dravonis interrupted. Because they are not the same. But let them come. I am curious to see what they will say. The first delegation arrived 3 days later. The Kelthran Collective, the same insect-like species that had brought singing crystals, now returned with even more impressive offerings. Their leader clicked forward, antennae quivering with what appeared to be emotion. Great Emperor Dravonis, the translator device proclaimed, we have come to express our deepest gratitude for your eternal protection. For generations your forces have kept our trade routes safe. We never properly acknowledged this tremendous gift. You paid tribute, Dravonis observed. Was that not acknowledgement? Tribute is mere transaction, the Kelthran said smoothly. True gratitude comes from the heart. We wish to be friends of the Empire as the humans are. To show our sincerity, we have brought treasures beyond our previous offerings, diamonds formed in the cores of neutron stars, each one worth more than a solar system. The Kelthrans unveiled their gifts. The court dragons gasped. The diamonds were indeed magnificent, pulsing with inner light that seemed to bend space around them. Dravonis studied the treasures for a long moment. Then he looked at the Kelthran delegation. You say gratitude comes from the heart, Dravonis said slowly. Tell me, when did you decide to come here? When did this gratitude suddenly appear in your hearts? The Kelthran leader hesitated. When we heard of your wisdom in recognizing true friendship, we realized. You realized that friendship might cost less than tribute, Dravonis finished. You saw an opportunity for a better deal. This is not gratitude. This is negotiation. But your majesty refused, Dravonis said firmly. Your tribute is rejected. You will continue paying your normal tribute as before. This audience is concluded. The Kelthrons were escorted out, their confusion evident. The court dragons whispered among themselves, equally confused. The next delegation arrived the following day. The Phosphine Collective brought living light forms even more beautiful than their previous offerings, swirling in patterns that told stories of dragon heroism through color and movement. Eternal Emperor, their representative began, we have composed these light poems in honor of your brave forces. Each one depicts a moment when dragon patrols saved our people. We wish to express our deep appreciation and request friendship status. Dravonis watched the light forms dance. They were beautiful. They probably took months to create. But something felt hollow about them. These are lovely, he said. Tell me about one of these moments. Pick any one. The Phosphine hesitated. Well, they are symbolic representations of. You cannot name a single specific incident, can you? Dravonis asked. These are generic celebrations of dragon power. They could depict anything. They depict nothing. We meant to honor all the times. Refused, Dravonis said. Next. One by one, delegations arrived with ever more impressive offerings. Each claimed sudden gratitude. Each brought treasures that dwarfed their normal tributes. And Dravonis refused them all. The technomancers of Forge World brought weapons capable of destroying stars. Refused. The Aurelians brought a perfectly carved planet, a work of art centuries in the making. Refused. The Metharian Empire brought the preserved remains of their greatest hero, offering to place it in Dravonis' hoard. Refused. After 2 weeks of audiences, Sethril finally worked up the courage to ask what everyone was thinking. Your Majesty, I do not understand. These offerings are worth more than anything we have ever received. The resources alone could fund the Empire for decades. Why refuse everything? Dravonis looked at his chief advisor. Bring me the drawing. The one the human child made. Sethril retrieved the crayon drawing from its stasis field, handling it carefully. Dravonis took it, studying the simple image once again. This cost nothing to make, Dravonis said. The materials are worthless. The artistic skill is minimal. A child made it in 2 hours. By every objective measure, it is the least valuable item ever offered to me. He held it up so the council could see. But it is worth more than all those other treasures combined. Do you know why? The council remained silent. Because it is real, Dravonis continued. Eddie did not make this to gain favor or reduce tribute payments. He made it because he genuinely wanted to thank me. His gratitude was not a transaction. It was pure. He set the drawing down carefully. Every delegation that has come here in the past 2 weeks brought treasures calculated to impress me. They rehearse speeches about gratitude they do not feel. They saw the humans receive special treatment and decided to copy the strategy. But they missed the essential point: you cannot fake sincerity. But Your Majesty, another advisor ventured, even if their motives are impure, the treasures are real. We could accept the gifts and refuse the friendship status. We could, Dravonis agreed. And then what? We continue as before? Continue building hordes of meaningless objects while pretending we are doing something important. He stood, his massive form radiating frustration. I have spent 50,000 years accumulating treasures. Do you know what I have learned? Treasures mean nothing. They are just things. Pretty things, rare things, powerful things, but still just things. They do not make you happy. They do not give your life meaning. The council shifted uncomfortably. This was unprecedented. Emperors did not question the value of wealth and power. The humans taught me something, Dravonis continued. They taught me that what matters is not what you own but what you do. Not how much treasure you accumulate but how many lives you touch positively. He looked around at his advisors. We are going to change how this empire operates. No more tribute as payment for protection. Protection is not a service we sell, it is a responsibility we fulfill because we have the power to do so. Your Majesty, Sethril protested, without tribute how do we fund the military? The administration? The empire's operations? We will find other ways, Dravonis said. Trade agreements, resource sharing, cooperative ventures, but not protection money. From this day forward, dragon forces protect those who need protection because it is right, not because it is profitable. The other species will take advantage, an advisor warned. They will stop paying anything and demand protection anyway. Perhaps some will, Dravonis acknowledged. But I would rather be taken advantage of while doing good than be wealthy while doing nothing meaningful. He issued orders that sent shockwaves through the Empire. Dragon Patrol forces were to continue all protection duties, but tribute collection was suspended pending new agreements. Species were invited to negotiate fair trade partnerships instead of one-sided tribute arrangements. The Imperial Treasury, fat with centuries of accumulated wealth, would fund operations until new systems were established. Dravones began distributing excess treasure to fund schools, hospitals, and infrastructure projects across the Empire. His advisors warned of economic collapse. They predicted chaos. They begged him to reconsider. But something unexpected happened. Some species, freed from mandatory tribute, did indeed stop paying anything. They took the protection and gave nothing back. But others, seeing genuine change in how the Empire operated, began offering real cooperation. They shared technology. They opened trade routes. They contributed resources not because they had to, but because they wanted to be part of something meaningful. The Phosphine Collective, stung by their initial rejection, actually studied their records and found specific incidents where dragons had saved their people. They came back with real stories, real gratitude, and a genuine offer of partnership. Dravones accepted. The Aurelians established a cultural exchange program, teaching dragon youth the art of patience and precision through sculpture. They asked for nothing in return except the satisfaction of sharing their knowledge. Slowly, painfully, the Empire began to transform. Not all at once. Not perfectly. But it was changing from a system based on fear and transactions into something that resembled a genuine alliance. 3 months after the Harper's visit, Dravones stood in his treasure vault again. He had given away 2/3 of his hoard. The mountains of gold were smaller. Many of the precious artifacts were gone, distributed to museums or educational institutions across the Empire. But the crayon drawing remained, still in its place of honor. And for the first time in millennia, Dravones looked at his hoard and felt something other than emptiness. He felt purpose. 10 years passed like a breath for Dravones, though for humans it was a substantial portion of their lives. The Empire had changed dramatically in that time. The transformation had been difficult, messy, and sometimes painful. Not all species embraced the new way of doing things. Some tried to exploit the system. Others clung to the old tribute arrangements because they understood transactions better than trust. But slowly, steadily, the Empire evolved. Dragon Patrol forces no longer operated as enforcers collecting protection money. They became genuine peacekeepers, responding to emergencies and protecting civilians because it was their purpose, not their profit. Young dragons joining the service were taught not just combat skills, but why their work mattered. They heard stories of families saved, disasters prevented, lives changed. The Imperial Palace itself had transformed. Where once it had been a monument to wealth and power, it now served as the administrative heart of a functioning alliance. The throne room still existed, but Dravones rarely used it for formal audiences anymore. Instead, he met with representatives in smaller chambers, having actual conversations rather than accepting tribute. On a warm spring day on Valdris Prime, a small transport ship requested landing permission. The communications officer on duty processed the request routinely until she saw the passenger manifest. Then she immediately contacted Sethril. "Chief Advisor, you need to see this. The Harper family is requesting an audience." Sethril, now grayer around his emerald scales but still sharp-minded, felt a jolt of recognition. The Harpers. The humans who had started everything. He had not heard that name in years, though he thought about them often. "Grant them immediate clearance," Sethril ordered, "and inform His Majesty at once." When Dravones heard the news, something he had not felt in millennia stirred in his chest: anticipation. He actually felt excited to see someone again. The transport landed on the same platform where a small family had arrived 10 years before. But only 2 people emerged this time. William and Sarah Harper stepped out, older now, their faces lined with the decade of hard work building a colony from scratch. And between them walked a young man who barely resembled the 7-year-old who had run across the throne room floor. Eddie Harper was 17 now, tall and lean from years of farm work. But his eyes held the same brightness, the same genuine warmth they had held as a child. Miris met them at the landing platform, her bronze scales now dulled slightly with age. "Welcome back," she said warmly. "His Majesty has been expecting you." "He knew we were coming?" Sarah asked, surprised. "He hoped you would return someday," Miris replied. "He speaks of you often." They walked through the palace and the Harpers stared in amazement. The corridors that had once displayed priceless artifacts now held something different. The walls were covered with images, Photographs, drawings, paintings. Thousands of them. What are all these? William asked. You will see, Mirrors said with what might have been a dragon's smile. They were not taken to the throne room. Instead, Mirrors led them to a chamber Eddie vaguely remembered, the informal room where Dravones had spoken with them years ago. But even this space had changed. The walls were lined with shelves and the shelves were filled with items. Small items. Simple items. Dravones was waiting for them, and Eddie was struck by how different the Emperor seemed. Still massive, still powerful, but there was something lighter about him. His golden eyes held warmth instead of distant weariness. William. Sarah. Eddie, Dravones said, and his voice held genuine pleasure. You have returned. Your Majesty, William began with a bow, but Dravones waved it away just as he had before. Please. After what your family did for me, formality seems absurd. Tell me about your lives. How is Hope's Landing? They sat and the conversation flowed easily. Sarah told him about the colony's growth, how they now had 300 families, successful farms, a school, even a small hospital. William described the challenges of terraforming, of building a community from nothing. Eddie talked about his studies. He had grown interested in interspecies relations, inspired by his childhood encounter. He had spent the last year studying at a university on Earth, learning about different cultures and how they connected. I wanted to come back and see you, Eddie said, to thank you again. But also to ask you something. Ask, Dravones encouraged. Did what I did really matter? My parents told me stories about how the Empire changed, but I was just a kid who drew a picture. Did that really make a difference? Dravones stood slowly. Come with me. I want to show you something. He led them deeper into the palace, into areas the Harpers had never seen before. They passed chambers filled with activity, dragons and various species working together on projects, planning sessions, educational programs. The palace hummed with purposeful energy. Finally, they reached a massive door that Dravones opened with a touch. Beyond it lay the treasure vault. But it was nothing like it had been. The mountains of gold were gone. The shelves of priceless artifacts were mostly empty. The vast cavern that had once held the wealth of empires now held something entirely different. The walls were covered floor to ceiling with letters. Thousands upon thousands of letters, carefully preserved and displayed. Between the letters were drawings, children's artwork from dozens of species, each one showing dragons helping someone. Display cases held simple objects. A farmer's hat from a world saved from drought. A child's toy from a family rescued from a natural disaster. A medical instrument used in a hospital funded by the Empire. A broken weapon from a conflict that dragons had prevented from escalating. This is my hoard now, Dravones said quietly. Eddie walked forward slowly, his eyes wide. You read some of the letters. They were thank you notes. Gratitude from people across the Empire whose lives had been touched by dragon forces doing good. After you left, Dravones explained, I realized that I had spent 50,000 years collecting things that meant nothing. So I gave most of it away. I used the wealth to fund schools, hospitals, infrastructure projects across the Empire. And in return, I asked for nothing. He gestured to the walls of letters. But people sent these anyway. Not because they had to. Not because they wanted something from me. But because they were genuinely grateful. Each one of these letters represents a life that was improved, a person who was helped, a moment that mattered. Sarah had tears in her eyes as she read a letter from a mother whose child had been saved by a dragon medical team. The drawings, Dravones continued, come from children across the Empire. When I reformed the dragon service, I established a program. We visit schools and tell young people about what we do and why we do it. We teach them that power exists to help others, not to dominate them. And they draw pictures. Eddie found himself standing before a familiar image. His own crayon drawing, still preserved in its stasis field, still in the center of the display. But now it was surrounded by thousands of other drawings, each one unique, each one precious. Yours was the first, Dravones said, standing beside him. The one that taught me what really matters. I keep it here to remind myself why I changed. A 7-year-old human child looked at me and saw a hero. I wanted to be worthy of that. Are you? Eddie asked quietly. Worthy of it? Dravones considered the question seriously. I try to be. Every day. That is all anyone can do, try to be worthy of the best version of ourselves that others see in us. William spoke up, his voice thick with emotion. Your Majesty, we're just farmers. We never imagined that our visit would lead to all this. You did something very few beings ever do, Dravones replied. You showed genuine kindness expecting nothing in return. You valued my actions more than my power. You taught your son that gratitude matters. These seem like small things, but small things can change everything. He looked at Eddie directly. You asked if what you did mattered. Look around this vault. Every letter here exists because you taught me that being thanked for doing good feels better than being feared for having power. Every school built with my former treasure exists because you showed me that wealth only has value when it improves lives. Every dragon who now serves with the goal of helping rather than dominating does so because a child called me a hero and I decided to earn that title. Eddie felt overwhelmed. He had just been a kid saying thank you. How had it become all this? The Empire is not perfect, Dravones continued. We still have conflicts, still have species that abuse our protection, still have dragons who prefer the old ways. Change is slow and difficult. But we are better than we were. We do more good than we did. We help more people than we ruled. He walked to a particular section of the vault where records were kept. In the past 10 years, dragon forces have prevented 47 wars, stopped 32 natural disasters, provided aid to over 1,000 worlds in crisis, and educated millions of young beings about cooperation and mutual benefit. None of this would have happened if I had remained the same, sitting on a hoard of meaningless treasure, accepting tribute out of fear. Sarah wiped her eyes. We just wanted to say thank you. And that simple act of gratitude changed the galaxy, Dravones said. Never underestimate the power of genuine kindness. Eddie stood for a long time, looking at his childhood drawing surrounded by evidence of transformation. He thought about how a simple impulse, wanting to thank someone who helped him, had rippled outward in ways he never could have imagined. I have something for you, Dravones said, breaking the reverent silence. He carefully removed a small medallion from a display case. This is the Imperial Medal of Honor. It is given to those who have significantly contributed to the Empire's well-being. He placed it in Eddie's hands. You are the youngest being ever to receive this and the first human. You earned it by reminding an ancient emperor that heroism matters more than power, that kindness matters more than wealth, and that a simple thank you can change everything. Eddie looked at the medallion, then at the emperor. I also have a request, Dravones said. You study interspecies relations. I would like you to work for the Empire. Travel to different worlds. Teach others what you taught me. Help species learn to cooperate, to show genuine gratitude, to value each other beyond transactions. You want me to be an ambassador? Eddie asked, stunned. I want you to be a teacher, Dravones corrected. The Empire needs more beings who understand that the best wealth is the positive impact you have on others. Who better to teach that than the person who taught me? Eddie looked at his parents. William smiled proudly. Sarah nodded encouragingly. I would be honored, Eddie said. As the Harper family prepared to leave, now with Eddie committed to returning to serve the Empire, Dravones walked them back through the palace. They passed dragon youth learning alongside students from other species, medical teams preparing for relief missions, and planning committees working on infrastructure projects. At the landing platform, Eddie turned back one more time. Thank you, he said simply, for listening to a kid with a crayon drawing. Dravones smiled, a real smile that transformed his ancient face. Thank you for teaching an old emperor that it is never too late to become the hero someone believes you can be. The transport lifted off, carrying the Harper family back to their lives. But Eddie would return and together with others like him, would continue the work of building an empire based not on fear and tribute, but on genuine cooperation and mutual respect. Dravones returned to his vault and looked at the collection of gratitude that had replaced his collection of gold. Every letter, every drawing, every simple token represented a connection between beings, a moment of genuine appreciation, proof that what he did mattered. He had spent 50,000 years accumulating wealth and feeling empty. Now he spent his days helping others and felt full. All because one child had simply said thank you.